this afternoon is the review of the consent items. Are there any concerns about the consent items that we'll vote on tomorrow? If not, take those up first thing in the morning. Hearing none. Next, an action item, the approval of the 2016 Board of Curators meeting calendar that Cindy has prepared and sent out. Are there any questions or concerns about the dates scheduled?
Move approval.
Is there a second? Is there a second to the motion? Okay. Cindy?
I'm counting.
We may
Yeah,
have a
here
quorum.
comes 5. I was making sure we had 5.
Okay. It's hard to run a train on time when the passengers aren't here. So. Okay, Cindy, would you call the roll?
Let's see, Curator Covington, Curator Cups,
Yes.
Curator Graham,
Yes.
Curator Henriksen,
Yes.
Curator Phillips, Curator Snowden,
Yes.
Curator Steelman.
Yes.
You have the 5 votes in favor.
Thank you. The next item is the Compensation Human Resources Committee report, and specifically concerning the annual retirement plan report.
Here he comes.
Okay. Yeah,
Here-
let's go ahead and start.
Here he comes, Don.
Okay.
Don. You can see the slides right here. And I'll review this as well. Ready?
I thought I might have walked in after you had already
I hadn't started yet.
So, we are now going to talk a bit about the University of Missouri retirement plan, have an annual report, talk about the returns that we've had and options that are being made available to current employees as well as new employees. And Betsy Rodriguez will lead that discussion.
Thank you. I'm going to start the presentation, and then Howard Rogg, our actuarial consultant, will speak briefly after me. So typically, the annual report on the retirement plan covers the defined benefit portion of the plan, which is our $3 billion retirement plan that you all spent the morning discussing in terms of investments. But now that the new plan is growing, and our retiree group is growing as well, I want to take a little bit broader view in looking at the retirement plan. So on this first slide, you see a side-by-side comparison of our new plan, which is the ERIP, Employee Retirement Investment Plan, compared to our defined benefit plan, which is formerly called the Retirement Disability and Death Plan. You can see that the ERIP plan is comprised of both a defined contribution and a defined benefit portion of that. And the defined benefit portion of that is about half the benefit of the full defined benefit plan. It's a little bit less than that. I want to point out a couple things on the slide. One is that all employees contribute to the defined benefit portion of either plan at the same levels. So employees pay 1% of the first $50,000 of salary and 2% after that. I also want to point out, under the defined contribution part of the new plan, there is no mandatory contribution beyond what they're contributing for the defined benefit portion. However, if they choose to match, if they choose to make a contribution, the university will match that dollar for dollar up to 3% of pay. Now, some of you will recall that we actually default employees into the 3% level, and very few, less than 5%, take themselves out of that default position. This was a very important feature to the board when we made the change to this plan, and so I wanted to let you all know that it appears to be working very well. I said I wanted to talk for a minute about the growing number of retirees, and this slide shows us over time the retirement eligible population. In 2005, that was 1,500 employees at the university were eligible to retire. In 2014, that is 4,000 employees. If you move into those yellow bars, you can see that by 2019, we will have 7,000 employees eligible to retire. So today, we have 25% of our employees that are eligible to retire. Now, this, of course, reflects the increase in retirement eligibility of the baby boomer generation. And the red line that you see running through that slide is the actual retirements that have occurred through 2014 and projected through 2019. Let's look at the impact of those retirements over time. So here we've got the number of retirees in payment, which are the blue bars, which has climbed from 6,500 in 2008 to a projected number on the yellow bars of 11,000 in 2019. This is partially driven by the numbers I just talked about, the higher number of people that are eligible for retirement and electing retirement, but it also shows an increased longevity, which I think probably makes us all feel good. Once an employee retires from the university, we do continue to support them. Is this very different than what you would see in the private sector? We are providing the monthly pension and the retirement benefits, but many of these retirees are extremely connected to the university. They're an important part of campus life. They give back in huge numbers, either through their time or money or both. So I think it's pretty important that we understand that. I want to put this group in perspective for you. The retiree population is now as large as the employee population of the MU campus. So I call them our fifth campus. I'll give you a few characteristics of our active members, and these are some of the numbers that Howard uses in his actuarial work. This page just gives you a number of demographics around age and years of service. I will point out the slide's divided into two sections. We look at administrative and academic personnel, and then we look at clerical and service. One of the things I want to point out on this slide, if you look at the far right column for the ERIP plan, and you look at the top number for academic administrative and the top number for clerical and service, if you add those together, we have almost 3,700 employees in the new plan. So out of 18,000 that are in the plans, a huge number of them, just after a few short years, are now in the new plan. Quickly, I wanted to show you a few characteristics of our retired members. In 2014, the average age for administrative and academic was about 64 and a half years old, and it was a little lower, which is typical for clerical and service, at a little over 62 and a half years old. I would like to report to you that our oldest retiree in payment just passed away, and he was 109. So he got his money's worth out of the plan. I'm going to lead into what Howard's going to talk to you about. You know that each year we do evaluation on the plan. This is completed so that we can determine how much our annual contribution needs to be to meet our funding obligations. The 2015 funding contribution is 10.25% of payroll, and you can see that broken out. There's a normal cost, and then there's the cost for the unfunded liability. And so the way that breaks out is the university will pay just under 9% next year, and the employees, or this year, and the employees pay just slightly over 1%. And this is due primarily to the gain on investments, but Howard's going to talk a little bit more about that. And just a reminder that we have been very diligent about fully funding this plan, so we do put the entire required contribution in every year, and it's one of the reasons our plan is doing well. And to the extent that our actual experience matches the plan assumptions, then we would be fully funded. And I'm going to let Howard talk. I also wanted to introduce you to Josh Kaplan, who is sitting in the back. Josh, would you raise your hand? He is one of the colleagues of Howard's at Siegel and spends a great deal working on our plan, so I wanted to thank you for that. And there's the...
Thank you, Betsy. Talk a little bit about the actuarial evaluation, and please stop me at any time for questions as they arise. We perform an actuarial evaluation every year. The valuation date is September 30th or October 1st. That's the date we review our annual base results. Now, what is a process of evaluation? First, we use the current provisions of the plan. If there have been any changes by the board, we reflect that in the valuation. Then we get all the active, retired, and terminated vested people who have a right to a pension sometime in the future or accruing pensions. Every single person. It's not like just raw data, group data. We get actually information on every single person, the date of birth, date of hire, service, salary. And what's the purpose of doing that? We do that so we can project for every single person into the future what the possibility of the benefits they're going to get. Whether or not they possibly will die in active service, there will be some death benefits. If they make it to different retirement ages, what will their retirement benefit be at that point in time, so that we can accurately predict how much money we are going to need. So when they are retired, that the money is already in the trust fund to pay those lifetime benefits. So it's not a pay-as-you-go type plan. The goal is to have for any active person, by the time they get to retired, they finish their service period of time, that the money is already in the trust to pay their lifetime benefit based on how long we expect them to live, and that until we actually pay out the money, we're going to be earning a certain investment return, which you've heard earlier, which is assumed to be 7.75%. Now, for purposes of calculating the annual contribution, we don't use market value. And as you've heard this morning, out of all the things that we have a lot of volatility in, of all the assumptions, of course, is in the investment return. So while the long-term rate is expected to be 7.75, that's the one assumption that you have probably from year to year, you have the most volatility and variation to it. And to try to temper the volatility on your annual contribution that could be a result of just a temporary 1 year or 2 year or 3 year temporary volatility in the return, we use what's known as actuarial value of assets. It's a smoothing technique. We'll see it in a second how it works. And so we use that for purposes of reporting your unfunded liability and using that for determining your annual contribution amount. So we'll see that in a second. Oh, drop. A little bit about your balance sheet as of September 30th. You could see that for the year ending September 30, 2014, we collected over employer contributions, $111 million, $14 million in employee contributions. Now, this is using actuarial value of assets, so this is not your market return. This is using what I just talked about, a smoothing technique. And on that smoothing technique of investment return, and again, you'll see in a slide how we determined that smoothing technique, we ended up with $257 million of investment income that we took into account for that year. That brought us to a total of $382 million worth of total income. But our benefit payments are $172 million. We're paying $172 million out in the last plan year, September 30th year. So our fund balance went from the prior year of $2,950 million to $3,160 million. So we crossed the $3 billion mark. Now, on an actuarial value, the smoothing technique, we earned 8.8% net of expenses, net of all expenses, investment expenses and administrative expenses. On a market value basis, you'll see in a second, we actually earned 7.9% net of all expenses. So we actually made slightly more than the 7.75, even after paying investment expenses and the cost of operating the plan. All right, so here's the smoothing technique. In order to, as I mentioned, not to use market because of the volatility from year to year, we use this technique called smoothing the investment return. So each year, it's a 5-year smoothing concept. So if you look at the most recent year, September 30, 2014, we earned 7.9%, which was slightly more than the 7.75% return that we were assuming. So when you see that original column, 4,583,000, that's not how much we made, that's how much more we made than the 7.75. It's against, if you want to look at it, the assumption. So we made $5 million, almost $5 million more in this last year than we assumed. So instead of taking it all into account at one time, the extra money, you phase it in over a 5-year period of time. So we take that last year's amount, and we take 5 years worth of it. We take it in 5 installments. We took one The first installment we took right away, September 30, 2014, and so 80% of that gain is now deferred. We're going to take the extra $3.6 million over the next 4 years in 4 tranches. And so that's how we're going to smooth it out. So we're not going to ignore the gain. We're just going to take it over a period of time. And if you look at the prior year, September 30, 2013, we were actually assuming for those prior years an 8% return. We changed to 7.75 effective September 30th, 2013. So again, the $88 million meant that we made in that year $88 million more than an 8% return in that year. Again, we took that over a 5-year period of time. So we've reflected 2 years worth of it. We've deferred 60% of it. So we have $53 million of that gain, which we have not yet reflected into actuarial value of assets. And similarly, you can go down the line. Of course, in 2011, $152 million. We didn't actually lose $152 million, but compared to an 8% return, it was $152 million less than what we would have gotten had we actually earned 8% on that year. And so this is the smoothing process. And so at the end of the day, we have $83 million that in actuarial value that we're using. Our market is actually $83 million higher than what we're actually using for determining your contribution. So we have a deferred gain that even if we continue to make 7.75 on market value going in forward, over the next 4 years, we are going to be picking up an extra $83 million as those gains were deferred are reflected. And you'll see that a little bit when we project out why your contributions are coming down a little bit in the future, is because if we continue to make 7.75, we're going to be picking up over the next 4 years in total an extra $83 million. Does anyone have any questions on that concept of using smoothing? The only thing we smooth is the assets. Yes.
Is this the last year of the 11 returns? Is this the last year they'll be considered?
The 11 return, the year September 30, 10, we took that into account, so we fully phased in the 10 return. But what's happened 2008-9, obviously with the market meltdown, we had significant losses, both real and compared to the assumption. It took us a while to phase those in, and you'll see that a little bit in our projection of unfunded. So we were smoothing that in. That's why when we did projections very often for the university, we kept saying your contributions are going to go up. Even if we make our assumption at that time 8% investment return, because we deferred a lot of those losses. And we knew that even if we made 8% of market from those lower points in 2008 and 9, as we phased in those prior losses, now they're fully phased in. Those 8 and 9 losses are fully phased in.
They're all accounted for now?
Yes.
Okay.
All those losses in 8 and 9 have been fully phased in. That's why we've kind of crested, and now we're seeing the contributions start coming down.
Thank you.
Let's take a look at the components of our actuarial liability. First, let's take a look at our retirees and beneficiaries, almost $1.5 billion. That means that as of September 30, 2014, if we need $1.447 billion in the trust. If they live according to what we think they're going to live based on mortality tables, updated mortality tables that we use, and we could earn 7.75% on the money until we actually pay it out to the retirees, we have enough money to pay those retirees. So we need almost $1.5 billion to pay lifetime benefits, almost like it's an annuity, but it's determined assuming that we can earn 7.75 on our money and they're going to live according to our mortality tables. We have about $200 million in inactive liability. These are people who are no longer active, but when they left, they had a vested right to a pension. And so they have a deferred right to a benefit that we have to consider. And so we hold a liability for them, and the value that we need as of September 30th, 2014 to pay their lifetime benefits is $200 million. And then almost $2 billion in the amount of money we should have already set aside for active employees to represent the portion of the benefits they have earned to date for the service they've already rendered. It takes into account not only the service they have to date, but it's based on what we think their final average salary be when they will retire. So it's based on benefit earned to date but a future projection on what the final average salary will be of the individual when they retire, so that we proportionately have set aside for the number of years they've already spent and already are accruing for that amount. So as of September 30, 2014, total value of what we should have accrued to have everybody up to date is $3.6 billion. The actuarial value of assets is $3.16 billion. And so we have on an actuarial unfunded liability $476 million in unfunded liability. Now, again, I mentioned market is actually 80-something million dollars more than that. So if we actually use market value to compare it to your liability, the actual fair value of market as of September 30, 2014, we're actually slightly less than $400 million underfunded. We're about 390-something million if we actually use the market and didn't defer the gains. Now, here's a history of the unfunded liability, again, using actuarial value of assets. You can see the 10-year history that, after the 2000, 2002 market declines, we actually had some unfunded liability that started catching up when we started getting better returns back in 2003 and 4 after that period of time. And so we actually became overfunded. We actually were overfunded in 2007 and 8. Had assets exceeded, and that's using even the smoothing method. Now, again, we had the downturn in 8 and 9. Now, why did we not completely drop and have an unfunded liability right away? And that's because of the smoothing. We had that big hit, but we didn't take it right away. You could see it took a while as we phased in the 2008-9 loss into the actuarial value of assets. We slowly started, even though we had good market returns after 8 and 9, just the factor of phasing in and continuing to phase in that 2008-9 losses resulted in our unfunded liability, which we were projecting to happen after the downturn, to go up. And now that we fully phased in that 8 and 9 return losses, and the last 5 years, you see 4 of them were positive, we actually have turned it around, and the unfunded liability is now declining. So a little bit of this is because we're not using market. You don't see the snap or the impact of the 8 and 9. Just because of the smoothing process, you see the delay or the smoothing of actuarial value assets and how that mitigates some of the immediate impact on your unfunded liability.
Percent of payroll.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Go back a chart, your final column, the percent of payroll.
Oh, okay. Well, you look at a magnitude of $476 million. And so under the accounting standards, how do you put that into perspective? Is that large? I mean, small college, that could be huge for a larger institution. So one way to try to put it in terms of just magnitude is what percentage of payroll is it? I mean, that gives it more of a context in terms of how significant is that unfunded liability. I mean, if it's 2 times payroll, it's a lot different than, for the same $476 million. If that was 2 times payroll, that gives you much more of a magnitude of how much of that is compared to the entity itself in terms of the obligation that it owes to the plan. So that's a way to just try to put it into context, economic context.
It'd be interesting to see how we compare to other like institutions.
And GASB, the GASB rules, the government accounting rules have changed a little bit, but this is one of the charts that are generally required for institutions who sponsor defined benefit plans to present is, the unfunded liability and, percentage of payroll costs. So that's something if you have some, we could look at some specific institutions if you're interested in looking at that and seeing how that compares. Okay, so what is the cost components of an annual valuation? First is we call it the normal cost. What's the normal cost? Well, you have active people who are going to be working another year. They're going to earn another benefit based on that 2.2% for people in Tier 1 and 1% for Tier 2. They're going to be earning an additional service credit that has value. That's going to produce a bigger retirement benefit for them for working the extra year. Well, how much is that worth? How much do we need to contribute so that the money is being put in now, and by the time they retire, we will pay for that extra year's worth of service? And based on when we think they're going to retire and what their final average salary will be when they retire, not today's salary, but what their final average salary will be when they retire, because that's where their retirement benefit will be based on. So that's about 6.62%, and that's now a combination of your, I call them level 1 and level 2 people. So we are seeing that percentage as we get more and more level 2 people come in at the lower benefit level in your defined benefit plan. That annual cost is coming down as a percentage. Of course, we're contributing more for level 2 people into the defined contribution component part of their plan. So that would be the cost if we were 100% funded. Just let's contribute what we need to pay for the extra year of service. But we saw that we are, $400 million underfunded. So we want to start making like a mortgage payment on it. We want to start paying it off. And so we're paying it off now over, the board has elected last time to go to a 29-year closed amortization. We were prior to that using 20-year open. So we're going to pay it off like a mortgage. That's costing us, to pay off that $482 million in liability, it's costing us $40 million. We want to pay it off. And that's costing us another 3.63% of payroll. That brings our total cost to the defined benefit plan of 10.25%. 1.29% is the employee portion when you factor in the 1% up to 50,000 and 1.5% above it. It averages to 1.29%. And so the net employer contribution calculated as the valuation date is 8.97%. Almost $100 million. Again, where we are, we have about $3.6 billion in liability around it, 3.2 in assets, so just about $500 million in unfunded liability. We're about using actuarial value. We're 87% funded. You probably know how that, you just read the papers and you know how many plans are not funded that well. And if we actually used market value, we're 89% funded. The extra, actually, you've used the full value, 89%, so almost 90% funded. I don't have to tell you about some other states in this country who make the newspaper daily. I've been here before, and I just wanted to say, the board that I've been working on this plan for 25 years. The board has always made the decisions to fund the plan, and I would say that the states that I've seen that are in trouble and the other ones have found ways not to fund things when they needed to fund them. I mean, I'll just be honest with you, and you probably know the states just by reading the newspaper.
Wouldn't we rank pretty high?
I think you will. And some states now, because of the downturn in 8 or 9, and you have to be careful you're using the same standards. Some will use actuarial value, but their actuarial value, instead of being below market, we have market above actuarial value because we've already phased in our 8 and 9 losses. There are some governmental entities now, because of the hit they took so hard in 2008-9, they're taking 10 years to phase in that loss. So their market value is actually the opposite. It's actual value is above it, and they're still having the issue about phasing in some of those losses. So when you look at funding percentage, you have to look to see, are they using actuarial value or your market to be sure that you're comparing a little bit apples to apples. There are other assumptions.
The numbers you've given, you said 87% funded. That would mean 13% unfunded
Right,
liability.
that's using actuarial value, and 89% if we used our true fair value of our assets as of September 30th. I'm not sure how many plans are better than 90% funded, and how many state plans are funded better than 90%.
I would think we'd be in the top 8 or 10 in the country.
And I always attribute it to HR, finance, and ultimately the board for always sticking with your plan. That's what it comes down to. You've always stuck with your plan, as Betsy said. You've always made the contribution as they came due. And I'm sure it has not always been easy to do that, especially when we've had some downturns in the financial markets.
You can stay right there. Again, I just wanted to talk briefly about the defined contribution piece because it is a growing piece of what we have employees using now. This part of the plan uses a master administrator. We happen to be using Fidelity. They do all our communications and education for us. They provide great online services for our participants. They do one-on-one services. They do all the administration, and of course, they make sure that we maintain our compliance. I wanted to point out that we not only use this for our defined contribution portion of the core retirement plan, but we also now use it for all of our voluntary retirement plans, and that has really lowered fees for participants and really increased services for them. There is an investment platform. We use multiple vendors, and we also have access to the TI-CREF funds. And here I just want to give you a quick review of the kinds of asset classes that we cover. It's a very broad range, and in some of these cases, we offer multiple funds through all different vendors. It's not all offered through Fidelity. And then our final slide, neither Howard or I can answer questions about this. We've shown you this slide before, but we wanted to show you something a little different this time. So you've seen the blue and the red bars, the blue being the university's contribution to the defined benefit plan over time. The red being the employee part of that, which of course started in 2010. And you can see that really changing amount, especially going up, and now, as Howard said, starting to come down. But what's new on this slide is the green bar. And the green bar represents the employer contribution to the defined contribution plan. And as I said, we started out with very few employees in there, and that has grown to almost 4,000 employees. And so you can see that the green bar is getting bigger and replacing part of the blue bar. So we have fewer people in the full defined benefit plan and more people in at least a portion of the defined contribution. So we'll be showing this to you going forward. And that does show you the total contribution, not just what needs to go into the defined benefit, but what also is going into the defined contribution as the employer contribution. Any questions
Or comments?
or comments?
I have a question on the DC plans that are available. Do we have an idea of what the investment costs the employees are paying?
I don't know that off the top of my head. Kelly, do you know what the fees are for the employees?
8 basis points for the administration fee, and then all of our funds are purchased on an institutional level, so we have the lowest expense ratio for the funds, but of course they do very high investment choice.
So
eight-
are there any loads on their purchases?
Yes, by loads, you mean the expenses for purchasing like diesel, laundry?
Right.
Yes, but those loads are not at the retail level. We actually provide them access to those at what's called the institutional level, which is the lowest expense rate for that fund in the market.
Do you have any idea of what those are?
They vary by, yeah, they vary greatly by fund, but we can definitely provide that to you. The investment committee looks at that every year, and we have a report on that, so we can definitely provide that to you.
Earlier, you mentioned that there were 5% that were not, that the default was that everyone was going in at 3%.
Correct.
Was the 5% that were not staying at the default rate, or was that 5% that weren't contributing anything?
It's both. Some people choose to lower their amount, and some people choose to completely not do any contribution. Do you have any idea, Kelly, the split? I'm guessing it's kind of mixed.
I think it is about half and half. It's about 2 to 3% at any given time that have
Just completely go out.
some who completely opt out. But keep in mind, they can change that on a month-to-month basis.
Mm-hmm.
And so we identify and readdress that with those employees on a regular basis to try and encourage them to get back in.
Yeah, it's one of the benefits of having the administrator is they can watch that stuff pretty carefully and make sure that employees are educated about the decisions that they're making.
So when someone chooses to do that, does someone counsels them?
Not immediately at the time, because we will see people go in and stop their contributions maybe for 2 months, then they can go right back in and do it. So it goes up and down, but we do look at that on a quarterly basis. And then we have 2 Fidelity consultants who are assigned to us, so we can actually identify those people and push that out to those consultants to reach out to those employees. They can do that by phone or one-on-one in person. We're pretty active about trying to keep on top of that because this is a core retirement plan.
And that number has stayed pretty consistent. That 5% has not varied a lot over the few years that we've had the plan, but we'll watch it very carefully. we're actually surprised it's so low, and we're pleased about that.
So I'd just like to commend you and administration for having introduced, I think maybe the year before I came on the board, the, what you're calling the is it the
IRP.
IRP?
IRP.
The Employee Retirement Investment Plan, which is kind of a hybrid. And I think it has allowed the benefit, defined benefit plan to the extent that it continues for the longer-term employees and partially for the new employees. I think it has allowed it to be well-funded, and as Phil said, you know, one of the better funded probably in the country in terms of universities. But I did want to call a few things to everybody's attention, and that is within a 6-year span, one of your graphs showed that we went from being overfunded to underfunded to the point of $500 million, and that's a huge, I mean, the most recent figure is just under $500 million, but within a very short period of time, the markets and the crash turned it upside down, and so it is a risky venture for a university to be totally or substantially invested in a defined benefit plan. The other thing is that we anguished a year ago over coming down to 7.75, and in retrospect, by gollies, that was a pretty good choice, although maybe it'll be even lower. So we were concerned because the lower the rate, sometimes the more you have to contribute. And then the defined contribution aspect, I think it's beautiful in that employees now can, if they choose to, save themselves. And I will point out the advantages to employees for everybody to hear, and I think we can revisit this from time to time, of portability and loans. And I'll just give you a quick example. I recently negotiated a steelworkers contract where they had older employees and new employees had defined contribution, and the bargaining unit, hundreds of employees, the older employees wanted to get in the defined contribution portion. It wasn't any more generous, but they saw the advantages of it, and the union leadership resisted it and would not permit them to escape from the union defined benefit plan, which we froze. And so, you know, these are interesting issues for us as a university to be thinking about, and I really commend you for you know, having the foresight to begin addressing this.
Thank you. One of the task force recommendations, as you all recall, was to take a look again at the retirement plan and make sure it is the best and most viable option for new and options for current employees, and we are actively working on that. We will be bringing you something around that topic in the next 6 to 12 months.
Any other questions? This was an information item. Thank you
Yes.
so much for
Thank
coming
you.
and
I
sharing with us.
appreciate it. I want your stuff back.
We now move to the Title IX issues, some of it informational, I think, and also some.
We have one more benefits item,
Okay.
an action item.
Oh, under the combining of the sections.
Yes. Do you want me to cover
So,
that?
yeah, why don't you go ahead and explain, we're actually taking a number of, let's say, disjointed
Yes.
various benefit plans and putting them in a manner in which even I could read them. Right now, you'd have to read all of the CRRs to figure out what your benefits are. So why don't you go ahead with that?
Thank you. I give a lot of credit to this to Kelly Stuck, who manages our benefit programs. And as she came on board and noticed that we had a variety of plan documents in the collected rules, which are the actual legal documents that govern those plans, but then we also had some benefits that were not in the collected rules, and there was no overarching policy to kind of pull all that together and really talk about what are the benefit programs that are available to employees. So what we've done today is brought to you a new collected rule that would be, I would describe it as an umbrella policy over benefits. And in the past, when you had these individual plan documents in the collected rules, when we had to make even minor changes to plan documents that were required under IRS rule or required, for example, under Affordable Care Act, we had to bring those changes to you, and yet we were required to make those changes. So what we're suggesting today is that we pull those plan documents out of the collected rules, which is literally hundreds of pages, and we create this overarching policy. I think what's probably most, let me go through and kind of talk to you about what we're pulling out, because I think that might be helpful. So there's a very lengthy medical plan document in there, which is 500-010. There is 510-010, which is the dental plan. There's a long-term disability plan in there, and there's a flexible spending account. And again, things like the flexible spending account are completely governed by our IRS rules, and we really have to follow those rules exactly. So when we bring you changes, it would have been around things that we really had no choice about changing. We are also taking out the voluntary retirement savings plans that the employees can do on their own that don't have any university contribution to them, and the defined contribution portion of the new retirement plan. Again, these plans are very much covered by IRS regulation, and so this policy would replace those. What we are not taking out of collected rule and not bringing any changes on is 530-010, which of course is the university's defined benefit plan that we just talked about. So that plan is staying in collected rule as is. So what this new policy would do is it clearly delegates to the president the authority for revising the plan documents as required by various regulations, and allows also us to make minor changes to the plans. For example, if we wanted to change a copay from $10 to $15 on the medical plan, that isn't something that we would bring to the board, but we would bring major changes to the plan, particularly around cost items, cost sharing between university and employees, and that kind of thing. And I think one of the most important things that's in this new collected rule is the establishment of an advisory committee. If you recall, we had a former advisory committee, but it was embedded in the retirement plan, so it really only had to do with the defined benefit plan. You all voted to remove that in December, I believe. Kelly's nodding, that's correct. And so this would establish a broader advisory committee of faculty, staff, and retirees that would deal with all issues related to benefits, not just the retirement plan. We spent a lot of time talking to various groups, and one of the groups in particular, the IFC, the Interfaculty Council, really wanted to see this group established in collected rule. And so that's one of the reasons that we've put that into this document. And we would make sure that we have very broad representation on that committee, and that's the way to ensure that faculty, staff, and retirees have input into the benefit programs. In addition, this policy would require us to bring to you reports on an annual or more frequent basis. Would require more monitoring and evaluations of those benefits. So are there any questions about the new policy?
What's the definition of major?
Let me see if the way it's described in here, it would have to do with things that are basically impacting the cost side of the benefits, and of course, adding or deleting any benefit would be the things we would call major. So my example of not major was changing a copay on a plan, anything around eligibility or adding or deleting a plan, changing the default, for example, on the defined contribution would be an example of something we would bring to you, all those kinds of things.
I understand what you're telling me. I don't see where major is defined, though. I mean, I'm not trying to be difficult. I'm just trying
I understand.
to make sure that, we aren't delegating what we don't intend to delegate.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's not specifically defined in here. It does talk about responsibilities and authority, but it doesn't specifically define that. It does say at the bottom of the first page, it says significant changes to the university's contribution or the participants' contributions, eligibility, vesting, those kinds of things would be brought to the board.
For information.
No, for actual vote. Oh, I'm sorry, it does say for information purposes. I apologize, you're absolutely right.
that any change would be brought to the board before the change was made. And so I think that is your opportunity to intervene and say, you know, we'd really like to take action on this, or
Yeah,
we're not
that's really
comfortable
important.
delegating this. And so I think, to me, that was the opportunity to intervene.
So I think that's really important, whether you voted or not, we would bring it to you before that change was made.
Well, I believe it says it will inform the board of significant plan changes to covered benefits prior to the effective date.
Correct.
And again, I'm back to what's significant and what's major.
Yeah,
We
it's,
might try a modified motion, I'm thinking right now. We had intended to say, I think the proposal before us was a proposed general policy on delegating to the president the authority for the revision of benefit plan documents, and we might say required by law, but reserves to the board of directors to have notice of any changes and approval by the board, so that if it's required by law, the president can do it. Otherwise, we at least get notice before the president can enact.
that was certainly our intention.
Would that satisfy the?
Did you get that, Cindy?
I think that's fine.
All right. Let me try to state a succinct motion without repeating all of the sections we're dealing with, and I'll frame the motion, and then the committee needs to make the motion. That would be that the sections enumerated and discussed by Vice President Rodriguez be taken out of the CCR and placed in a general policy that outlines the authority for the provision of benefits programs to participants as described in the respective plan documents. The proposed general policy delegates to the president of the university the authority for revision of benefits plan documents required by law, and reserves to the board the right to have notice and the authority to approve other changes to the benefits programs to which the new section would apply. That means we get notice. If we don't issue it, then if we don't take issue with it, the president has the authority.
That was certainly our intention, so that works for us.
I'm not on the committee, but may I comment?
Sure.
I don't have any problem with the president making changes that are required by law. I think that's common sense, we do that. I don't have problems with the president making changes, minor changes, once the board has been given notice of them to where we can object or not. I guess my concern is what is major and what is minor, and I think it's all in that thing. I would like to see some language drafted that maybe addresses that more so, but.
What about definition of material, using material and having the word material defined in a way that we're all accustomed to seeing? Would that maybe work?
Yes.
Just a thought.
Also, the delegation actually says it's without limitation.
So the underlying section would need to be changed to be in accord with the motion that I'm suggesting we make. So the motion's going to change the wording on the actual Chapter 120 a little bit. You wouldn't have it without limitation. If required by law, yes. Otherwise, we get notice, get to approve.
So whether it's minor or major?
Yeah,
then-
right. Because as Don points out, it's hard to define that. Well,
It-
we
it-
have a committee, and I think we have curators Graham, Hendrickson, and Covington. Anybody?
Can I ask a question as your parliamentarian? Make sure that I understand and perhaps everyone else understands the exact amendment. So as I understand the amendment, most of which would be changing language in the last sentence of the action item,
Yes?
you would authorize the president to make changes that are required by law. And for all other changes, he may make them, but they wouldn't become effective until the board has had notice of them and an opportunity to object.
I think that's a fair summary.
Okay, so it's a notice and opportunity to object as opposed to outright approval by the board?
Well said.
Okay. And with that, it seems to me that the definition of significant, major, or material is not necessary. Is that fair?
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Any further thought about that or comment? Good crafting by our general counsel.
Not crafted yet.
Can I just pose a question for Vice President Rodriguez? Are there a lot of changes that you anticipate being made that are in the category of trivial that still would have to go to the Board of Curators?
Possibly, but let me give you probably the best example. So every year we make tweaks to the medical plan. We may change a deductible, we may add a prior authorization for a surgery, et cetera. However, while each one of those is trivial, we do list those as overall plan changes, and we could on an annual basis very easily bring that to the board to have you look at. But that's the most common kind of change to the medical plan. Typically, there's no changes to dental, life, disability. The other, and flex, those are typically things that we change only if we're required. A medical plan, we adjust just about every year and probably in 5 to 20 different ways, depending on kind of what's going on cost-wise. So that's probably the best example. And we could certainly, while I wouldn't want to bring each one because it would kill you with the detail, I think we could certainly bring the overall list of plan changes, and that would address the issue of whether you consider them to be material or significant.
Historically, how have we brought these to the board's attention?
In a lump sum change, just like I just described. We have to go through the plan document and actually do the redlining to show what we've changed. Mhm.
So this really isn't a change.
Not really, yeah. I mean, it's a little bit easier to do the change than the way it was before.
Do we have a motion? Dies for lack of a motion.
We're already doing this in some form or other. But I sort of feel that by this practice, we will really be on a precipice if I'm not down deep into micromanaging, or could be led in that direction. So I'm not going to make a big. I'll go along, but is there not a way to obviate the need for such incredible detail to be brought to us so formally? We're presented the materials, but we don't talk about them at this point, is what I'm trying to say. That's our custom so far. So if you're going to tweak a deductible, we know about that, but we go down deep into the materials to see that at some point. We don't discuss it at a board meeting.
Correct.
So I guess I'm just trying to make sure we don't start down that path.
I was gonna suggest I'll be sent to you.
I think
No, do whatever.
an example of what we wouldn't want the president doing is changing the balance, but current balance between the defined contribution and the defined benefit. And I think Marcy's correct in pointing out that when we say without limitation, well, we don't mean that. I'm not sure how you get between that and the trivial. Without saying he's got the authority, unless we object, as our general counsel has scripted it. That does seem to me to give us oversight, and if somebody
Well, it
wants to
seems
pick.
like there's a consensus on what we want to do. I think we're just
Yes?
struggling with the wording.
And we struggled with the same thing doing this, because our overriding concern was to make sure that you were aware of very critical, important changes, particularly those involving cost. And also, there are a number of benefits that are not even in the collected rules. And so we wanted to be clear that you have authority over all benefits, not just the ones that happen to be in collected rules. So, but this is the struggle that we had of how to balance this, to make sure that you are fully informed and with the appropriate opportunity to weigh in and approve.
Steve, I thought that your language was masterful. Could you state that again? And let's give that further thought.
That was a long time ago. Certainly. As I understand what you were suggesting was that you would change, and most of the changes in the action item would be in the last sentence and the last phrase, so that the president can, in fact, make changes that are required by law, and that those would not need to come to the board either in advance or afterwards for approval. That for all other changes, the president could make them, but they would not become effective until there had been notice to the board and an opportunity to object by the board.
That keeps us from having to define what's important, what's not.
Correct.
I'll buckle up and make the motion.
Well, I think as chair, I can second that motion. All right, would you call the roll?
Curator Covington,
Yes.
Curator Graham,
Yes,
Curator Henriksen,
Yes.
Curator Phillips.
Yes.
Okay, all committee votes in favor.
All right. I then recommend to the board the adoption of the motion as modified with the language that our general counsel has carefully crafted, making it clear both in the motion and in the chapter, or it's section 520.101, that it's not without limitation, but that the president does have the authority to make changes as required by law, and that other changes would be with notice to the board and the opportunity to object or modify before they become effective.
you take a look at that section 2, second sentence, of the second line. It says without limitation.
Different page, this would be 1-4,
Yep.
the actual
Okay, thank you.
section itself. That would need to be modified.
What line is that? Second line.
I don't have a hard copy of that, I'm sorry. Hold on.
So a motion for the board has been made.
Is there a second?
Second.
Would you call the roll, please?
May I discuss, John?
Yes.
I liked Curator Covington's suggestion that material be included in it. And I'm not comfortable voting for something that I haven't read. And I would like to, even though I trust our general counsel implicitly, I'm not sure that I am willing to vote for something until it's defined in what material is in the rules. There's my suggestion, so. I guess it would be appropriate to move to table it at this time till the June meeting. Is there any reason this needs to be adopted this meeting?
The biggest push for us was establishing the employee committee, but the rest of this absolutely could wait, so we can make that work.
I'll move to table.
But
Tim?
we still can establish the committee. We have to wait.
I think we'll need to
Is that
wait.
right? We can still have the committee, right?
No, I mean, I guess the
Okay.
president could have a committee, but
Well,
it wouldn't be by collected rule.
But the committee that we're the task, total.
Total Rewards Advisory Committee.
Advisory, that's what we're trying to establish, and we need them to be established so that we can keep on track relative to other investigative changes to benefits, et cetera, et cetera. So we couldn't do that till this was in place.
Well, you could establish a committee, it just wouldn't be under collected rule, so I don't know why you couldn't go ahead and have a committee, and then we could define it in collected rule.
Okay.
Curator Graham, may I suggest that we table the delegation of authority and adopt the rest of the change and table the delegation of
I'll
authority
accept that amendment.
until the June meeting, when it's better defined?
I'll accept that amendment. That would be my motion.
Second the amended motion.
Any other discussion? Cindy? I guess we are voting now on the motion to table the portion of the change in the collected rule until the June meeting that concerning delegation. Cindy?
Just for clarification purpose, does everyone understand what you're not tabling?
Why don't you tell us?
Well, maybe I'm asking the question for myself.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
I'm asking the question for myself. What is it you're not tabling?
I think we are not tabling, here's what I think. I think we are not tabling all of the changes with the exception of the delegation of authority. And the only portion of the proposed changes that we are tabling is the delegation of authority, and that's pending additional language drafted by the General Counsel's office.
So that would be section 2.
Section 6.
I gave you my copy, so
Maybe both.
2 and 6.
Yeah, both, I think.
Section 2 is the one that delegates to the president, and then the last section is the one that provides for the reporting and monitoring. Section 6.
So I think that's probably just a clarification to your motion to table, which is you're tabling, yeah, clarification to the amended motion to table. I believe you are saying that you would table anything with regard to delegation and perhaps reporting, and that's what's contained in paragraphs 2 and 6 of the proposed new rule, and that you are moving for adoption the remainder of the proposed new rule.
That was my motion.
That was one I thought I was seconding too.
So on the motion to table, Cindy, would you call the roll?
Curator Covington,
Yes.
Curator Cups,
Yes.
Curator Graham,
Yes.
Curator Henriksen,
Yes.
Curator Phillips,
Yes.
Curator Snowden,
Yes.
Curator Steelman.
Yes.
Okay, all votes in favor.
Okay. Concerning the adoption of the remainder of the rule, with the exception of the delegation of sections 2 and 6, is there a motion to do that? Or that motion has already been
Yeah,
made?
it's out there.
Okay, any other discussion concerning it? Cindy, would you call the roll?
Curator Covington,
Yes.
Curator Cups,
Yes.
Curator Graham,
Yes.
Curator Henriksen,
Yes.
Curator Phillips,
Yes.
Curator Snowden,
Yes.
Curator Steelman.
Yes.
Okay, all votes in favor.
All right, now we have a joint committee. We're a little behind schedule, but this is going to be a brief update on the Title IX, and this is the Committee of Compensation and Human Resources and the Academic, Student, and External Affairs Committee. And I guess by way of background for those listening, we did adopt substantial revisions in our February meeting, and I think the university has proceeded very quickly with implementation. I've actually done some monitoring more on the Kansas City campus to see how we're doing with respect to implementation of training and putting in place Title IX coordinators. And I guess my thought is that the university continues to act very quickly. I was pleased with what I've learned, and I think Vice President Rodriguez is going to give us a brief overview.
Thank you. I have quite a few slides, so I'm going to actually go through some of them pretty quickly. If you don't have these in your materials, I'll make sure that you get them. Let me start by saying, why is the HR person talking about Title IX? And that's because Title IX touches every corner of our institutions. It impacts faculty, staff, students, visitors, fans, donors. I could go on and on. Obviously, we focus mostly on students, but we all want our campuses to be compliant, and we all want it to be the safest possible place it can be, especially for our students. So I'm standing here, but I'm actually representing a huge number of people. In particular, I'm representing the campus chancellors who have put a lot of their own time and energy into this effort that we've done, the president, all of my system colleagues. Steve Owens and his legal team have provided a ton of support to this project, particularly working very closely with the IFC. Gary Allen's folks on the IT side have been a critical part. Hank Foley's team has worked very closely with us. And of course, the campus chancellors and faculty and just a ton of people across the campuses. So while I'm speaking from a system standpoint, so much of this is happening on the campuses, and I just wanted to let you know that I'm here representing a huge number of people. This is the timeline of our past, present, and future. One of the things that President Wolf made very clear is that we want to be a national model, and to do that, we have a multi-year project, which really has a ton of projects underneath that. I'm going to talk very briefly about our past, focus a little bit more on the current, and talk to you about the future. One question that comes up a lot is, how did you decide what to put on this timeline and where to put things on the timeline? And there are so many more things that we could be doing. We have to make decisions. And so we have three things in mind. We focus on compliance. Clearly, we want to be in compliance. And clearly, we want to focus on safety. We focus on what our consultants have been telling us that we need to be doing, especially as they've been working with the campuses. And then lastly, we've really been focusing on best practices. What are the best ways to manage these things to ensure that we're meeting all the needs that we have? I also want to say this is not a one-size-fits-all project, which is why it's important that it's not completely characterized as a system project. All of our campuses are different. They all have different cultures and different ways that their students interact in various ways. And so I think it's important that we understand we're trying to meet the students where they are physically, where they are mentally, where they are socially. This is not about us prescribing what we think needs to happen for the students. So the students themselves have been very involved in some of these activities. So our accomplishments to date, I've got 5 of them listed here. I only want to focus on 4 because, as Curator Phillips just mentioned, we've talked quite a lot about the policies that have been implemented. So when you looked at that full timeline, I'm going to focus just for a minute on the left side of that. The other thing I wanted to tell you is that Steve Owens and I have both been at conferences recently with other higher education institutions, and obviously Title IX is top of everyone's mind. And both of us have had occasions to question our peers and ask where they are. And Steve and I both feel that we are really ahead of many of our peers. I think, Steve, you would agree with that, and that many of them are still struggling with the policy piece of this. And I feel like we've really moved past that. So I just wanted to let you know that while we have a lot of work still to do, we feel very good about where we are today. And I'll just briefly talk about a couple of these. We have new Title IX curators on 2 of the campuses. Both at MU and UMKC. These are very seasoned individuals with a ton of expertise. We have a new person at S&T, and UMSL is in the middle of hiring some new people as well. I personally have spent time with most of these individuals, and I'm so impressed with the team that's getting put together around Title IX. There's been a lot of people focused on it in the past, and we have even more folks doing it now with a ton of energy and expertise that they're bringing. The Title IX coordinators have been getting together more around kind of compliance issues for the last year, but they're starting a week from Monday to get together in a very different way. They're going to pull together and really look at how they can share resources across the campuses. It'll actually be the first day for Ellen Erdley, who's the new Title IX administrator, is actually her title for MU, and I think it'll be a wonderful opportunity for her to meet her colleagues. Obviously, our focus is on students, but also Title IX affects employees in two ways. One, they can be either accused or a potential complainant, but also our faculty and staff interact with students on a daily basis. So we have two courses that we ask them to take. One is a harassment course that we've had for some time that we've added some Title IX information to. And the second is a course targeted toward them as mandatory reporters. I'm very pleased to tell you that we are very high numbers of faculty and staff that have taken the course. You can see in the far right column that we're well over 80%, but on several of our campuses, especially our larger campus, we are well over 90%. These are not just full-time employees, these are both full-time and some part-time folks. So we've had a really great participation by faculty and staff. I'm very pleased to say that overall we've had over 36,000 faculty and staff take these courses. We have also trained a ton of key personnel. Some are new employees and some have been here for a while. And many of them have taken a lot of time out of their schedules to travel to these pretty lengthy, you can see some of these are 4-day trainings. So they've spent a lot of time putting in efforts to really get up to speed on how they can best handle reporting, investigating, and adjudicating these cases. Oops, getting ahead of myself here, trying to hurry. The president, as you know, wanted to put resources into this, not just people, but also money. And we have set aside $2.2 million for the campuses and system to spend on this. We've made some big decisions recently about how we're going to spend that money. The campuses are all doing different things. These are not the only things they're doing. I just wanted to highlight some things that were kind of different for each campus. MU is really trying to enhance their education and prevention efforts. I mentioned here the MU Counseling Center, but they're also putting some funds into their RSVP Center, which is the center that deals with relationship and sexual violence prevention. So they're putting a lot of effort into that prevention side. S&T's been working on their infrastructure and hiring, as you can see, a lot more people to handle some of these situations. UMKC's been training staff in trauma-focused and culturally competent therapies. And UMSL has been working on putting in a 24/7 hotline. So this is not all the campuses are doing. I just wanted to highlight a few things to show you that there's a lot going on. Let's look at what we're doing right now, and that is sort of the May-June timeframe. We really have 5 priorities, and Curator Cupps has talked about this being the year of the student, and I think that's a good way to describe what's going on in Title IX right now. Most of these are focused very directly on students, whether it's student training, a student climate survey, case management software, or just infrastructure things that we're working on. And this shows some examples of where we're leveraging our system resources, but the work is really being done on the campuses. So let's start with talking about educating students on prevention and awareness. We are launching the Not Anymore training on all the campuses. This training includes 19 modules. It's developed by a firm called Student Success. UMKC and MU had some funds from a Department of Justice grant that they had over the last few years, and they have been piloting this among a bunch of leadership groups. I think UMKC has actually put most of their students, a huge significant number of their students, through this training. And so we would now going to like to roll this out for all new students. It'll be part of the freshman orientation and transfer orientation for students over the summer. And then any students that don't take it over the summer will be required to take it very early in the fall. This is mandatory for students. It's not something they can choose to do. And if they don't take it, the campuses are all working on different ways to force that. And they're looking at putting holds on student accounts and things like that. I think the best way to describe this training is for you to see some students talking about it. I can't actually show you the demo of it, but I'm going to show you people describing this training, and we'll cross our fingers that this works.
Our generation is different.
We're no longer going to put up with sexual assault, dating and domestic violence, and stalking.
We're also not going to tolerate bullying and sexual harassment.
And we're not going to stand by and do nothing when we see any of these behaviors happening.
In fact, our attitude boils down to just 2 words.
Not anymore.
Not
anymore.
Not anymore.
Not Anymore is a new interactive online program from Student Success.
Not Anymore inspires students to take action to help reduce sexual assault, dating and domestic violence, stalking, bullying, and sexual harassment. Students also learn the characteristics of healthy and unhealthy relationships.
Not Anymore is the only online violence prevention program that allows you to customize both the length and the content of the program to meet your campus's needs.
You can select from a variety of primary and secondary modules on these topics to build the program that works for your campus and your students.
Not Anymore uses peer presenters, survivor testimonials, video-based scenarios, bystander testimonials, student interviews, motion graphics, animations, and more to create an engaging experience for your students.
Not Anymore also helps your campus meet Violence Against Women Act, Campus Save, and Title IX education mandates.
To that end, you can integrate your campus's definitions for interpersonal violence, as well as campus policies and procedures, directly into the Not Anymore program.
Not Anymore also includes interactive elements that confront students with their own misconceptions, as well as those of their peers.
For example, as students watch Not Anymore, the program will occasionally remind them of a pretest answer they gave, then show the correct answer.
The program will then also display how viewers' peers answer this question.
Challenging students with their own misconceptions at relevant moments in programming not only helps defeat rape myths, it also improves learning outcomes.
And confronting students with their peers' understanding lets Not Anymore use social norming to generate stronger attitudinal change.
Plus, each module includes post-test questions, which can be customized for your campus.
And, of course, Not Anymore lets you easily track student participation and confirm that your students have completed the program.
Not Anymore also includes a toolkit to help you meet the federal compliance requirement for ongoing prevention efforts, and there's even a version of Not Anymore specifically designed for graduate students. So, do you need to keep searching for a way to change student attitudes and behaviors?
And do you need to continue looking for a way to meet federal mandates on interpersonal violence education?
Not anymore.
Questions? Okay, I'll move on. So our second priority for now is gathering and assessing data, and I'm very pleased to tell you that we have our survey out now. It went out in early April, and we are closely monitoring our response rate and hoping to get to 20%. That's that's a big goal. Typically, student surveys do not generate that much response, but we have a few incentives built in. There are $500 prizes for each campus, and so we're hoping that helps. There's also a huge social media campaign around the survey, and so we've got a lot of tweeting and Facebook and texting and all kinds of things going out to the students. So if you know any students on any of the campuses, I hope you'll encourage them to participate. It is a random sample, so not every student got the survey, but if you can help us promote the survey and get the word out, I think it will really help. We've gotten some really good feedback from students so far who have taken the survey, who find it to be really worthwhile. Any questions about the survey? And we'll be bringing you the results of that in June. We're also implementing some case management software. I won't spend a lot of time on this. This is kind of a behind-the-scenes thing, but it will help us update cases and manage cases more efficiently and effectively. It's going to help the whole Title IX teams be more responsive, and of course, it'll allow us to to understand trends and things that are going on. The fourth priority is to continue to build our infrastructure, and I mentioned that we're hiring staff and developing prevention programs such as some of the ones that you saw. Many of the campuses use this online training, but they use it in a blended environment where students then discuss the information that they saw online. And they're continuing to provide some student conduct support as well. The last priority that I wanted to talk about is campus safety and security. There's really two ways we're addressing this. One is we're trying to increase the number of confidential reporters. As you recall, most of our faculty and staff are mandated reporters. Some people prefer to be called responsible reporter. The word mandated is what's used in the Title IX language. But responsible, mandatory, it means they have an obligation to report. So we are trying to increase the ways that students can talk to somebody who is not obligated to do that reporting. And the campuses are trying to increase those folks and also make them more visible on the campuses. The second effort that's underway is to find a way to get more information to students very quickly and right at the time that they need it. I talked about us trying to be where the students are. So we've been looking at some phone apps, because that's really the best way to get information out these days. There are some phone apps on the consumer market, and the campuses, but when I say we, I really mean the campuses have looked at these. Gary Allen's folks have been very involved, whether it's the campus CIOs or whether it's the folks that work at the system offices with Gary have been involved in looking at these. There's a price for a lot of these. It can range from as little as $2 a month to $20 a month. Right now, we're not intending to spend system or Title IX funding on these. Students can certainly purchase these on their own. There are some issues with the apps, and some of it has to do with the way they have to enter information. Some of it has to do with data security. The real issue here is that there's been pretty low adoption rates of these, and some concerns about false reporting and things like that. So what we're focusing on now instead is an application that Gary's folks have developed, and I'm going to keep using the word free because it's free, and it's called Safe Mizzou, and it's actually part of the app that current students are using now called Go Mizzou. So students are used to going to this app. It has all kinds of campus information around dining and classes and all kinds of things like that, but now there's a module within that is a safety module. It does have the Mizzou brand on it, but Gary's folks have offered it to the other campuses, again, at no charge, and they can certainly brand this, and it's very configurable in terms of how they want it to work. It did launch in early March, so you can actually go to the App Store now and download this app if you want to kind of mess around with it. If you open the app, this is what you see. You see an opening page where it gives you some basic information, but immediately you see this crisis safety button. And so the first thing you see when you open that is that button, and you can look at all kinds of just general information, but you can immediately push that button, and when you do, you immediately go into alert tweets. So these are, if there's any kind of emergency situation going on campus, you would see these tweets here. And then there's a whole list, and you actually can scroll through these. There's a whole list of places you can go, but you'll notice the very first thing you can do is call 911. Immediately from this place, you can call 911. You can also look up mental health services. You can go to the sexual assault and interpersonal violence, the RSVP Center. You can get to the Title IX resources. Anytime you click on these, you can get immediate information. So if I were to, I'm sorry, I'm still at the same location. I just wanted to show you this slide because when the tweets expire, so if there's not an emergency situation going on, then there's kind of a rotating carousel that shows all kinds of highlights of various campus events. But again, the 911 is still on there. If I were to click on mental health, then what would pop up on the right side of this screen is a description of what's available for mental health services. And you'll see at the bottom there's a number to call. You just push that. You don't have to dial anything. You just push that and you get there. You can also push the website and you can immediately go to the mental health services that are available on campus. In this case, it happens to be through the MU Counseling Center. If I pushed Title IX instead, and same thing happens, I get information about the Title IX office. Again, I can immediately call the office. I can immediately go to their website. I can get all kinds of information. If you scroll through this, you'll see that there's a variety of situations that people could respond to. So if something has happened to somebody, they can scroll through here and get some decisions pretty quickly. It's clear when it's a confidential reporter versus a mandatory kind of reporting situation. So or somebody may just want to seek mental health or medical care, and that's all available here as well. As I mentioned, the app is completely configurable and is available to the other campuses. I know S&T is in the process of testing it, and I know the other campuses are considering it. And the reason I say that is I was talking to UMKC earlier, and they're actually testing a different app. And so then they're going to want to kind of compare and see which one works best for them. Again, we're trying to have the campuses do what's best for their student population, where their students are, and what's most meaningful to their students. Any questions about that?
How do you become a confidential reporter?
That's a great question. So some people are confidential reporters by nature of their duty. So mental health professional, medical provider are automatically confidential reporters because of the job that they do. But it's also possible for a campus to designate other people as confidential, and they simply work through Steve, the legal office, and we create that designation, then we can publicize it.
And those people aren't paid necessarily anything additional to do that.
Correct. They're often in their current role. So they may have the kind of job where they interact with students in a way that it would be very helpful to have them be a confidential reporter. It gives students a place to talk through what they think may have happened either to them or to a friend and decide what they think their best course of action is without somebody taking action on their behalf.
So a student can become a confidential reporter?
No, it would be faculty or staff.
Is a student a mandatory reporter?
Yes,
Every student is a mandatory reporter.
yes.
Okay, so we've cast the net rather broadly for mandatory reporters, and there is a space that some universities use to expand the role of confidential advisors.
So if I hear about a situation, even if I heard about it and wasn't cognizant or didn't see it, I still have a duty to report it?
I'm not sure hearsay.
It starts getting a little bit gray. Steve, do you want to respond to that?
Sure, actually you do. You are required to report it whether you have firsthand knowledge or not.
Though not, I think we decided that not all students are mandatory reporters. It's if you're an employee and in a student role, it can get a little, whether you're a student at the time or an employee at the time, it gets a little tricky, but.
But the current status is that if you're just a student, you're still a mandatory reporter.
I didn't think so.
No.
Okay.
Student,
Well, I
yeah,
thought-
student, I'm sorry, student employees, right. I
that's-
missed.
Right.
Yeah, I'm sorry, it's a very important distinction. A student employee is a mandated reporter.
So is what you said true? Every student is a mandatory reporter?
No,
No.
I thought they were not mandatory reporters
They are
unless
not.
they were also employees. And
Right.
RA, like
Betsy's agreeing with that now.
Correct, yes.
So I've got a comment or two. Cutting edge, great speed with which this was done, sometimes at breathtaking pace to the faculty. There is, I think, still work to be done. I'm going to mention a few categories. One is the confidential advisor, and whether to expand that or not. Another is the thoroughness of the mandatory reporter training, which we've experienced, and whether that's sufficient. We had to get something in place, and we did. I heard you say that it's currently a campus choice about student training, and I see on your final slide, well, maybe it didn't get up there, but that mandatory training for new students is a fiscal year 2016. I hope that that's in place by this fall.
Oh,
So
yes.
that every new student will receive appropriate training, not just about how to report, but about the sexual issues that you experience when you
Yeah,
come
let
to
me
campus.
clarify that, because FY16 actually starts July 1st of 2015. So actually, starting in June, when they run the students through summer orientation, this is part of the summer orientation curriculum. So it's in place immediately.
And it won't be campus choice, that's a university issue?
Well, it's campus choice in terms of how the modules are designed and exactly how they want to deliver the content, but all campuses are required to have all new students go through the training.
You already know that I wish that we had an app that was different than the one that's been launched. And finally, the faculty issue with respect to the faculty process. And I'll report publicly that I think the IFC's done a wonderful job of vetting this, imperfect, and that I think part of their view is that this will be subject to continued discussion, and that at some point in time, the president will come back to us with suggested changes. Now, any questions? I wanted to get the comments out because I'm late for a conference phone call and I'm going to have to excuse myself. Questions?
Are there plans to train existing students?
That's a great question. So a number of existing students have already been trained. I think over 8,000 students on the campuses, especially student leadership has been trained on all the campuses. But currently, there is not a plan in place to train all current students. The idea was to train the new students and eventually get them all trained. Now, that's different by campus. There are some campuses that are going to try to train all students, but the focus right now is on the new students. That's not to say we're not going to try to get them all trained. The mandated part of this right now is new students.
Other questions?
I was hoping that the safety security app would be separate and apart from the general campus app. That's something that every student got, and they had a campus security app or a Safe Mizzou app or Safe S&T app. And I don't know. This is great. I mean, what's happened here, but I guess I had a vision that, you know, every student, when they enrolled, they had this app. Part of orientation is this app goes on there, and mental health issues, which is I guess a crisis on campuses, that they could go and report a roommate or something like that. So.
Gary, you might want to respond to this, but it's my understanding that they wanted to use an app that students were already using so that they could ensure that people would use it. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, the design so far has been based on with the people that are in charge of student services on the campuses, so the vice chancellors for student affairs and the people that are involved in the counseling center and the police departments on each of the campuses. So based on the feedback from the professionals that are responsible for providing those services and based on feedback from student interviews themselves, they've been trying to do designs that are in keeping with the use cases that the students describe, that the emergency professionals have described. So some of the features that are in there, or in some cases some of the features that are not in there, are based upon feedback from police department, for example, that if you make this single button alert kind of a situation, we will expect to see a dramatic increase in false alarms because we're already seeing them with the apps that they're already using. And the students have given this thing is going to continue to evolve, and we need to continue to get true in on the sweet spot for how this app should work. But what we've done so far has been based on the iterations that we've had with the users and the people that are responsible for the safety of the students, to the extent that we've been able to do that to date. So we'll keep fine tuning.
Might be good to check with those universities that have adopted an early response app that is aimed at prevention, not reporting of incidents after the fact. There are universities that have adopted it broadly and appear to be pleased with it. So it is two different things. And that reminds me of the other point that I didn't raise, and that is, at some point, I hope that we spend a lot more time and funds on prevention. That app would be a piece of it, but general education, alcohol, review of the Greek system, and I'm a Greek, making sure that we have proper oversight, I think are as important as trying to increase the number of reports of incidents.
And I think if the campus were up here talking, they would tell you that's been one of their primary focuses is on prevention. Yes.
And we had to get the policies in place and the training, so we're doing the right things first, and compliments to everyone for all the progress that's been made.
Right. Tracy?
One more question. In regards to the training rolling out for incoming students, will that include graduate and professional students as well, or just undergraduates?
Yes.
Okay.
All new students.
Okay.
Anything else? Thank you.
Thank you. I think that probably concludes the Compensation and Human Resources Committee. Is there a motion from some member of the committee to adjourn it?
I move.
I'll second.
Curator Covington?
Yes.
Curator Graham?
Yes.
Curator Henriksen?
Yes.
Okay. All votes in favor.
Next is the Academic and Student and External Affairs Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have two presentations, and Steve Knorr will do our first university relations report.
Curator Covington, thank you. Given that I'm currently 15 minutes into the Finance Committees, I'm going to do my best to speed this up, and we'll get you back on pace here. I just wanted to start off with our strategic plan. Everything we do is kind of rolled up into this and give us our guidance. Obviously, our theme is leveraging the system resources to support campuses and our strengths. We increase federal and state government presence as our lever. And then we have these action items under here, which I won't go into great detail, but you'll notice one of those is just looking at students and student internships. So Curator Cups, one of the things that with your theme of the year, or the year of the student, I thought this gave us an opportunity to maybe start off the presentation here with talking about the students. Our staff advocates, university relations staff advocates for daily, for the best interest of students in the minds of lawmakers and the public. In addition, we assist students through internships and opportunities, other experiences that introduce them to the legislative process on the state and the national level. This exposure gives them a voice and to help get the university message to lawmakers. I want to share with you a video we produced with the help of MU's Academic Support Center that summarizes a small fraction of the experiences our students are gaining through the university programs and opportunities. Although university relations isn't necessarily responsible for these organized events or all the internship programs, we help foster the experience for the students. We use every tool or resource to further the university's agenda, and these experiences are only made better through teamwork, collaboration among university faculty, staff, and students. So let's take a look at the video real quick.
I am presenting to the State Congress and State Senate of Missouri in order to bring light to pretty much how undergraduate research at this level is beneficial to our state as well as to the schools within the state especially.
It can be nerve-wracking. You know, speaking in public isn't something that a lot of people feel comfortable and confident doing. So the more experience you get with the more varied audiences, the more comfortable and confident you become in your own work and your own research. Getting to interact with any of the legislators was really an amazing opportunity for me. And so I was grateful for that. Sometimes you can get caught off guard by something that you weren't expecting. So it gives you good guidance. You know, if I present this research in the future, I'll say, hey, you know, this is what I need to make sure I include so that people can really understand it and see the value in it.
This displays in really specific ways what undergraduates in the entire UM system are doing to help train our state's future workforce.
We have really bright people across all 4 campuses, and the undergrad research days is one of those days that those people can come out and say, like, this is what I've been doing, this is what my education has shown me how to do.
The Civic Leaders Internship Program, the Office of Service Learning at the University of Missouri, they made sure that I got a really good placement for me.
Going through CLIP, I had to, they have a couple workshops, and then they also go through their application process. And really for me, the experience was I got to go out and possibly find my own internship here in the Capitol.
The Capitol is one of the most exciting buildings in the state, probably. You come in on a Tuesday morning and things are just hectic as soon as you get here. It's really just a place where ideas come to meet.
Actually, a lot of my friends, a lot of people I know that either study political science or like me study economics or something related, that they would like to in the future apply to policy work or politics work, have worked through the CLIP program and have gotten internships here at the Capitol.
We have internships in the CLIP program that can be kind of intimidating to people, the governor's office, Secretary of State, but honestly, go for it, because the worst thing that can happen is that you don't get the position, but I think you get something better out of that, and that's a learning experience.
It's worth the challenge because you'll come out from the other end with more confidence and more professional skills and the ability to work with so many more new people.
An internship is a once in a lifetime opportunity, and it's the one chance that you'll have to network not only with your peers but with other state representatives.
This kind of gives me a great hands-on opportunity to really learn the process, something that I've been studying from the outside and kind of being immersed into it. There's no other way to learn it or to do it than just getting in it. And so without CLIP, I wouldn't have had that opportunity.
Having interns brings a different energy and passion to the workplace. You know, I'm very fortunate to have the interns that I have had. They've done an excellent job. You know, I think it definitely gives me a fresh perspective.
ASUM stands for the Associated Students of the University of Missouri. It is a student lobbying organization that represents all 4 University of Missouri system schools. So that's over 77,000 students.
We want students to care about politics, doesn't matter conservative or liberal, we just want students to be involved.
So ASUM has 4 legislative priorities. One of them is always state appropriations requests. So we work with the University of Missouri system and we lobby for that core appropriations request. But another part of that is also capital improvements on all 4 campuses and the 50-50 match project. And it's really important for the students to be able to do that in addition to the university lobbyists here in Jefferson City, because that gives a student perspective on it and they can say, you know, yes, I've had this experience in this building, I was there, here is how it not being renovated, you know, affected me as a student.
For us, just letting the representative know that we exist and that we need money in our UM system will help us get better programs and better buildings. It will improve the students' quality of life.
I think honestly, what ASUM has done is put into perspective how important state politics are.
ASUM Executive Director Katie Steen and ASUM intern Adam Bryant, who is also an S&T student in the audience. I just asked them to stand. They'd be happy to visit with you, the board members or anyone else, and answer any questions after the meeting. I just want to thank Katie and Adam for coming and for participating. It's been a great program, and the students help us so much in Jefferson City and Washington, D.C. In the video, you saw clips of Undergraduate Research Day. This is an annual event that is organized by Dr. Hank Foley's shop in the Office of Academic Affairs. This year, we had 59 students from 4 campuses presented their research papers, and they had the opportunity to meet their hometown senator and representative and talk to them about their work. Before the event, we distributed a media advisory and then individual news releases to each of the students' hometowns. This was a way to recognize both the student and the representative, and it was a proud moment for many of those in those communities. More than a dozen of these students were featured in their hometown newspaper, including Liberty, Jackson, Gladstone, Marshfield, Clinton, Rolla, and even a feature piece in the St. Louis Post-Dispatch Suburban Journal, and you see those behind you, or behind me, sorry. You also saw in the video interns from the CLIP program and ASUM to talk about the value of their experience. Through programs like CLIP and ASUM, in addition to several individual programs, the University of Missouri's 4 campuses are represented by 4 interns currently in Washington, D.C., more than 75 interns at the state capitol in Jefferson City. These internships are truly opening doors. Zach Sweets, who you saw in the video talking about how he is taking things he learned in the political science field and applying them to his everyday work with Senator Holzman, recently was just offered a position, full-time position with Senator Holzman. So intern leads to something else. The CLIP and ASUM aren't the only ways for students to gain this exposure, especially on the federal side. Last year, we were fortunate enough to see a long-term goal for the university relations come to life, which was one of the strategic plans, action plans that you saw on the first slide. Through a strategic investment from both the system and our campuses, and thank you, chancellors, for your investment in this, the system was able to expand the federal legislative internship program, also known as the Congressional Scholars Program, from a summer program to a year-long opportunity, and also offer it to all 4 campuses. This group photo was taken last summer, on the first class for the 4 campus congressional scholars. Jordan Wood, in the bottom left of the group photo, was fortunate enough to walk away from the internship in D.C. with a job offer from Senator Blunt's office in their Jeff City office. Campuses offer individual opportunities through organizations like MU's Kinder Foundation program, which give 21 students the chance to intern in D.C. for the summer and take classes. This qualifies them for a minor in constitutional democracy. Ona Rung, pictured in the bottom left photo, is in D.C. right now interning for Senator McCaskill and was offered a Kinder opportunity, so he'll stick around this summer as well. Senator McCaskill started an endowment, which you may have heard of and remember, to honor her late mother, that gives an MU political science student the chance to intern in the congressional office each summer in Washington, D.C. UMKC has their Truman Bootstrap Award, which gives 2 students all expenses paid opportunities to Washington, D.C. These students are having the time of their lives in Washington, D.C. and using the opportunities given them to really explore what their career options might look like. With the expansion of our system program in D.C., in addition to other campus opportunities, we'll have the growing number of students representing the UM system on Capitol Hill, working with Missouri senators and representatives this summer. Through the organized programs, I believe our count now is about 35 students. Whether it's interacting with our hometown legislators or working diligently to understand the day-to-day experiences of state and federal lawmakers, or advocating on behalf of their fellow students and alma mater, providing a student voice and a perspective to legislation, University of Missouri students are gaining knowledge and valuable skills for their futures, and the University Relations team is proud to be a part of that. Now I'd like to introduce you to the newest team member of the University Relations team, that is Sarah Spreitzer. This position came out of our strategic plan and working with the campuses, again, to expand our federal presence in Washington, D.C. even broader. We're excited to have Sarah on board. She comes to us with more than 15 years of experience representing major research universities in Washington, D.C., before Congress and the federal research and science agencies. This gives us an opportunity to enhance our Capitol Hill presence, strengthen our relationships with federal agencies, foundations, national foundations, industry partners, and national associations, and be a local resource in Washington, D.C. to help with UM students, interns, faculty, and staff when they're in D.C. There are 2 current pieces of federal items I want to bring to your attention. One that we touched on briefly just a few moments ago with the Campus Accountability and Safety Act that Senator McCaskill has introduced. It's the second version of that. There's been a few changes put in place since the first one, but this legislation is bipartisan support. Senator Blunt is also a co-sponsor. There have been significant changes based on conversations we've had with Senator McCaskill and input from President Wolf. Because President Wolf is viewed as a leader, Senator McCaskill has really turned to the president to help guide her approach on this new legislation as she's moving forward. A quick update on the federal FY16 federal budget as well, and appropriations at the end of March. Both the House and the Senate passed a budget for the first time since 2010, passed a budget resolution that outlines a federal budget plan for the next 10 years. Both plans from the House and the Senate promise to balance the federal budget in 10 years with no increase in taxes. And so you know what that means. Frankly, we will not see much of an increase in the budget for education or research. And so as President Wolf has said before, we're going to have to move from good to great in order to compete and win our fair share of federal funding research for the University of Missouri. On the state side, our core appropriations are moving along. The funding in the Senate is set to increase at 3%. They've also included $10 million for the School of Medicine, as well as $2 million for the UMKC School of Pharmacy. In the House, the budget is at 1.3%, is set to increase, but no funding for the School of Medicine. And so all of that will go to conference. And so we can pretty much rest assured that our budget from a core appropriation standpoint is going to be from 1.3 to 3%. We have met earlier this week with all 13 public presidents of the universities in the state, and I can assure you that everyone is working in lockstep to help us have the House recede to the Senate position when it comes to our core appropriations. For maintenance and repair projects, the House is still determining how to fund and appropriate these projects. The Senate included one project on each of our campuses for $56 million in legislation that they've already passed. They've also included $11 million in the budget to pay for the first year of bonding, so they're set and ready to go. Those will be conferenceable items, and we just need to push the House to send that through. Curator Stillman?
Yeah, would you comment? I think the board needs to hear it. When Curator Snowden and I accompanied you to the Capitol, the speaker has some very specific questions or comments on how we handle our maintenance and repair, and I think the board and officers should hear that because he may be in a position to kind of require some things out of us.
Yeah, Curator Stillman, good question. I think that the speaker is wrestling with the maintenance and repair issue on the state side, much like we are, and how to handle the state's facilities when it comes to maintenance and repair. So we asked a specific question, and Brian Burnett may be able to help out on that, of what we spend from a university's policy standpoint when it comes to maintenance and repair, and what the cost figure would be on that, Brian. And I think at that point in time, we took a...
How much we defer? How do we handle our deferred?
Well, the campuses do allocate portions of their budget for annual maintenance and repair, probably at a level higher than our COFI peers across the state, but we specifically proposed putting some savings from refinancing our bonds and investments from the campuses to help this tranche of M&R go further, I think by 30% more than what the state's giving us when you add it all up. So I think we're leading the way on that, but obviously we still have $1.4 billion backlog even after we get this, if we can get this part moving this year.
Yeah, I think it was, his specific question was around our budget overall, and I think I answered at that point in time. I believed it was about 1.5%, Brian, but that may be something we need to come back and address with the speaker as he raises the issue.
Concern, whether we had dedicated enough to that. What percent do we use?
Well, it was cut in the years that there, I mean, the investments were reduced and part of a lot of tough decisions that were made during the downturn. So, I mean, I don't know that we're hitting the 1.5%, but.
Just so that, again, you can be aware and the other members
Sure.
of the board, and Steve will correct me if I'm wrong, I think his point was if we're going to use state funds for some of that and issue those bonds, that he expects our participation, or would ask that our participation be at least equal on our percentage to that of the state. Is that?
I think that was it.
I think we can meet that target.
I do want to thank Curator Stillman and Snowden for coming to the Capitol and helping us make the rounds. One of the things that was very helpful in having them there was to obviously talk about our 50/50 projects. We're working hard and trying to move those through. We have a long road to go on that one, to be quite honest with you. The Senate has passed legislation redirecting some of the bonding that I've brought before the board before. And to move forward, there's nothing that's moved on the House side. And as you know, we are crunching down on days left in this session. So we're gonna keep working hard on those projects as we move forward, and I'll keep the board posted. We did have some good news last week. The governor released $43 million in funds that was withheld at the end of last legislative session. The university includes $5.32 million for the remainder of the MU School of Medicine's expansion in Southwest Missouri, and $1.2 million for the state match for Missouri S&T's experimental mine building. This is the first 50/50 project that has received its match, and the governor is still withholding funds from the other 3 campuses that we have. But we're grateful for the release of these funds. We think it sends a great message. We look forward to the opportunity to have other funds that can come through. We hope that at the end of April, that the revenues would be strong, just like they were in March. At March, we ended up at 6.77% growth for the month of March. Obviously, we are hoping for strong revenue growth in April, and maybe that would free up the opportunity for some of those funds for the governor to release for those other 3 projects. Next Monday at 11 a.m., MU is hosting a groundbreaking to commemorate the start of Lafferty Hall's renovation. We have invited legislators and many others, and we hope some of the board members can make it as well. And to thank everybody for their hard work that they put in to see this project come to fruition. This is a perfect illustration of what happens when we work together with the state on maximizing these public-private partnerships. Though through student lobbying, private donations, the state coming through with bonding initiatives and overall constituent support, a true team effort, we are celebrating this new renovation and a project that will benefit students for future generations. This is hopefully just the beginning with this groundbreaking, and we're looking forward to coming back to Rolla and celebrating the experimental mine groundbreaking here in the near future. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Steve, very much. Vice President Foley, are we going to do the amendments to Chapter 460?
So I'd like to bring forward those amendments to the collected rules, and they have to do with the dental faculty practice plan at UMKC and modification thereof. The goals of this coalescence are to simplify the plan, to make it more understandable and operationalizable. It's also going to change the way that net income is paid out to individuals. It will now be considered supplemental compensation, that is the practice plan compensation, will not be included in the calculation of retirement other benefits. I admit to having no particular expertise in this kind of thing. I will admit that. However, as due diligence, when faced with a 50-page document like this, I went to Vice President Rodriguez, and she's assured me that this brings us into conformity with other practice plans around the country, looks much more like that which is done elsewhere. And with your permission, I would invite her to perhaps say a couple of words if she would like to.
I had a chance to review the initial plan that was brought forth a few months ago and had a few suggestions and revisions, and and questions, and those have all been addressed. So I recommend that you approve this.
I had a question. I tried reading it. I didn't. I'm not sure I got through it. Does it increase the amount that the university, as I understand it, does it increase the expenditures of the university, or is it just redefining how they're paid out?
Well, my understanding is that it clarifies that exactly what will be charged to the practice plan that the practice plan has to cover. In other words, there are certain expenses that the university incurs on their behalf, and it assures that those are clarified, and also clarifies that following their coverage of those expenses, then they can go forward with distributions to practitioners.
Really? I mean, should it be no net change of?
No, it should not be any
expenditures.
Right. It just clarifies those. The plan was initially put together in like 1983, and so this is a way to update it, put in place a separate operating plan that has appropriate procedures in it.
And Leo, isn't it the case that the practice plan monies could vary year to year depending on?
It could.
Which is why, if it sounds like we're hedging on the answer or not, it's just that it changes from year to year, so it's hard to know precisely.
Any other questions? I think that there are only 2 committee members present, so I will, as chair, move that the committee recommend to the board the amendments set forth in our materials with respect to Chapter 460 of the collected rules. And Curator Snowden, can you second that?
I will. I will second it.
Roll call.
Curator Covington?
Yes.
Curator Snowden?
Yes.
Okay. All committee votes in favor?
Chair, the committee recommends amendments to 460.
Is that a motion?
It is.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Not, Cindy?
Curator Covington?
Yes.
Curator Cups?
Yes.
Curator Graham?
Yes.
Curator Henriksen?
Yes.
Curator Phillips? Curator Snowden?
Yes.
Curator Steelman?
Yes.
Okay, you have 6 votes in favor.
Audit Committee? Or, excuse me, Finance Committee.
Mr.
Oh,
Chairman?
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, may I make a comment before we start with finance? Just for our listeners who are online, listening to our meeting, if we could just remind everybody to use your mics or speak a little bit closer to the mics when you speak, would be great. Thank you.
Is there a motion to adjourn the committee?
Adjourn?
Yes.
So moved.
Second.
Curator Covington?
Yes.
Curator Snowden?
Yes.
Okay, all votes in favor.
Thank you. I guess we resume finance now, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, ma'am.
President Burnett. Brian, would you mind addressing the, just adjusting a bit, if it's not inconvenient to you, the order of business for this committee and taking up the action item first? Thank you.
There's only one action item, and there's no PowerPoint for it, so there's nothing to look up on the screen, but I'm happy to do that. So the only action item for finance today is project approval for our teaching hospital at MU, the patient care tower, and this is under open finance 1-1 in your materials. I think it's, let's see, page 271 of the big packet. But essentially, MU is requesting approval to spend about $11.2 million to fit out the third and fourth floor shelf space of the patient care tower that was built several years ago. They did build this shelf space with the idea that they would, when the funds and the demand were there, they would have this. I know Curator Henriksen here is sitting on the MU Health Board. So it is something that was planned all along. The money comes from the health system. And as you can see in the write-up, they're seeing increased growth in surgical volumes, which is good for the bottom line and good for the health care of the mid-Missouri area. And in addition, bringing in that Columbia Surgical Associates, they see demand growing for these operating rooms. And they need to build them within the guidelines of CMS so that they are eligible for Medicaid and Medicare reimbursement. So about 15,000 gross square feet of shelf space. We'll build them 6 operating rooms. It's obviously not very inexpensive to build operating rooms that are state-of-the-art, but it makes sense to, in the stacked environment, to do it all at once rather than come back and do the HVAC system. So they believe the most economical way to build these 6 operating rooms is do them all at once. And the administration's recommending approval of this project. Happy to take any questions that I can answer for you.
Any questions of Brian Burnett on this issue? If not, may I have a motion and a second to recommend to the board to approve the University of Missouri Teaching Hospital Patient Care Tower fit out of 3rd and 4th floor shelf space project for the University of Missouri Columbia?
So moved.
Second.
Curator Covington?
Yes.
Curator Phillips? Curator Snowden?
Yes.
Curator Steelman?
Yes.
Okay. You have 3 votes in favor of the committee.
Thank you, and Mr. Chair, I move the same to the full board.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? If not, Cindy, please call the roll.
Curator Covington?
Yes.
Curator Cups?
Yes.
Curator Graham?
Yes.
Curator Henriksen?
Yes.
Curator Phillips? Curator Snowden?
Yes.
Curator Steelman?
Yes.
Okay, you have all votes in favor.
Thank you, Brian. I'm going to move along with the information items.
Sure. I have 3 information items for you today. Following up on our discussion just before with Steve Knorr's presentation. I just got some information to share with all of you. In fiscal year 14, our campuses collectively spent $132 million on facilities improvements, of which $76 million of that came out of E&G. So it's not like the campuses aren't trying to make those improvements along, but at some point you've got to get these major M&R projects done. So they are taking about $76 million out of tuition and state support each year across all 4 campuses. It's about $7 million short of trying to get to our stated goal of our FC&I of 0.3. So there were some cuts in the years when the downturn happened, when they were making cuts in all kinds of places, but it isn't like a significant effort isn't being made by each of the 4 campuses to maintain the facilities that the state once built for them, and now they need to maintain essentially out of tuition and state support when the state doesn't have a ready continuing source of money to maintain these buildings. So I wanted to get that number to you just since we were just talking about it. I just have a brief presentation on the budget status, and it's not advancing for me. If we could get that to move. And this really follows on to Steve Knorr's presentation. Thank you. Our budget timeline, we're kind of in this place. At the last meeting in January and February, you approved the tuition and fees for next year, the supplemental fees, and the housing and dining rates. Now, we're basically just today going to give you a preliminary status, and it is a moving target. Obviously, the governor and the House were at one area. The Senate was at a higher level. We're hoping that we're closer to the Senate number when the final state budget makes it to the governor's desk. In June, at your June meeting, you will approve the fiscal year 2016 operating budgets for all the campuses in the system, and then in July, you will approve we'll be asking you to approve our appropriations request for the next fiscal year that begins on July 1 of the next year. Just a reminder and just an overview where our money comes from within the budget, the $3 billion budget of our system. You can see that a quarter of our money comes from hospital operations. 25%, or about $750 million, is coming into MU Health. Self-funded activities, that's like your bookstores, your dormitories, those types of things, about 23% or $690 million. Operations, the big red pie chart out to the right, that is where the majority of, that's where our education takes place. That's our education and services. And then at the top, loan, endowment, and plans, small. Restricted operations are like grants and contracts, endowment expenditures, that type of thing. So this is the $3 billion budget pie. And really we focus on that red piece because that is the flexible area for education and, of our students. So where does the red piece come from? So of that red piece of the pie, you can see of the $1.2 billion, about half of it comes from tuition and fees. 35% comes from the state appropriations, and then 13% comes from gifts and endowments, that type of thing. And then out to the right, as you've heard many times from Vice President Rodriguez and myself, when you put salaries and wages with benefits, about 78% of our spend is paying people to deliver services, to deliver education, to deliver the classroom experience, and to take care of our campuses. Our revenue drivers on this side, again, we've built in at least the governor's recommendation of 1.3%. We're hoping that that state appropriation or that red pie piece of the pie gets a little bit bigger through the legislative process. 1.3 would increase our core appropriation by about $5.7 million. If we got to 3%, we're pushing more like $15 million for the system. So that's a $10 million swing in those two numbers between the Senate and the House, and that's not insignificant, even in a $3 billion budget. Tuition and fees were already approved. We'll be bringing you what those look like because those obviously are driven off of mix, enrollment, how much is in-state, out-of-state, those types of things will drive what that revenue estimate looks like when we do the budget in June.
Brian, excuse me.
Sorry.
Why don't we take about a 5-minute break?
Okay.
Thank you, Brian. I apologize for the interruption.
No worries. So just to wrap up this budget overview presentation, tuition and fees, again, the big blue piece of the operations budget, we'll be bringing you more specificity around that at the June meeting by campus, by system. State appropriations, we obviously by June should know more about that appropriation as well and our core appropriation. Other income, we anticipate to be relatively flat or slightly down just because there's just some things that we'll detail more for you in June. On the cost side, the campuses are targeting merit increases of about 1.8% on the salary and wage base, funded largely through reallocation because there's not a lot of increase to the base core. Our benefit rate, as Vice President Rodriguez talked about, and we've stated to you before, will stay flat at 27.72% of benefit eligible salary. We will have increases, obviously, in operations cost, insurance, debt service, maintenance and repair of about $14 million across the system. And the campuses together are roughly, at this point, targeting about $15 million for strategic investments. That's on top of another reallocation of about $20 million that's different by each campus. But they're not just looking at strategic investments on top of what they're already doing, they're also looking at reallocation. We'll talk about that more in June. So that is simply a high-level snapshot of where we're at. You'll have more specificity, and you'll be asked to approve the 2016 operating budget at your next meeting, regularly scheduled meeting in June. Questions that I can take for that?
Questions?
We have two more informational items, Mr. Chairman. If you could pull up the Missouri S&T. The next one on our list is for this campus, a new residential housing project, and this is an informational item of a project that you improved, that the curators approved last year. And just to the west of here, I believe, is where this is across 44. But this area, I think we're located right in here. So this is just to the northwest of this center we're in right now. And this replaces housing that was built in 1959. It's old and it needs to be replaced, and it has $35 million of deferred maintenance that would be on the auxiliary side, not on the E&G side or the general fund side. But by doing this project at $30 million, they literally wipe out $35 million of maintenance and repair on these old buildings, and they pick up about 50 beds, it appears. So you've approved it. We took advantage of our low interest rates and our strong bond credit rating, and this has already been funded. So we'll walk you through what the designs, they are using a design build program. That's it detailed in your minutes, but the legend just shows the different community spaces. They have 4-bed apartments, they have 8-bed apartments. They also have spaces for the resident assistants that lead these areas for them. And you can see it kind of lays out in a S to fit the area that's available to the west of where they currently have new residential colleges built. So it lays into the topography and the available land of the campus very nicely, and it takes out some old buildings that need to be taken out to renew the campus a little bit here on this edge. So this is the second floor. You can see just a combination of 4-bed apartments, some staff apartments, and 8-bed apartments that move up this as they stack. And then the third and fourth floor plan are identical with 4-bed apartments and 8-bed apartments and some community and support spaces. And obviously a very modern housing setting for young people who will be coming to S&T for years to come. This is what the illustration looks like from the architects, of what it looks like from a bird's eye view and a little bit better in a 3D form. And I think it'll be a very attractive addition to this edge of the campus and obviously refresh a big piece of the housing stock here at S&T. And I'm happy to take any questions, or I'm sure Chancellor Schrader's able and willing to answer any questions that you have from the board. But this is the extent of the informational item here today, and you can see this aerial view looking northeast towards these new facilities, so you'll start to see these come out of the ground in the next year.
It didn't appear there were any dining facilities associated with these apartments, is that?
I think these are all apartments, and Chancellor Schrader, I think that the idea was that this was going to be more of an apartment setting and rather than dormitory, but if you'd like to.
You're absolutely correct. There are no dining facilities associated with this residence hall, but these are more apartment style, and so there's the ability to prepare food themselves.
Thank you.
When I met with the Vice Chancellor Branson here on the campus yesterday, I know they're looking at their food service as the campus has gotten bigger and how they can expand food service, but in this sense, this wouldn't add demand to the food service because these would be apartments. And so it is a mix in a modern college and university campus to have apartments and the typical dormitories where you rely on food service. In this case, this will not add to their dining challenges to build dining for them. So I think it's going to be a very attractive addition, and I think they're on a good schedule, and it will really take care of some old problems on this edge of the campus.
So what's the timetable for getting this online?
I have, from my information, let's see. Did you have this? Oh, August of 16 is what our schedule says, August of 16. So these should come on for the next academic year, be available for students in the academic year 16-17. And that's pretty aggressive time frame to put up $30 million worth of apartments. So, any other questions on that one? Our last informational item for you today in the Finance Committee is on the Kansas City campus. And for the new curators, let's see, we'll back up on that. Okay. This is the first slide. So this is the Oak Street Phase 3 project. And you may recall that the campus has been working along that edge across from the administration building and the parking garage with the housing on the Kansas City campus. This is the Whole Foods project that has been taking a long time to come to fruition between a real estate firm, between Whole Foods, between the UMKC campus. And it really is a mixed use piece that's going to bring a whole new piece of life to that area across from the administration building that's right now a parking lot. What you can see here is the Whole Foods sits facing the neighborhood towards Oak Street, and the campuses, the piece that will serve UMKC and the student affairs will face the campus, which makes a great deal of sense. They're also, as you may recall, they're moving the Young Matrons building to another part of the campus to make room for this. So there's all kinds of moving parts that have been worked on for quite some time. And we'll walk through what this will look like. So from the Oak Street, or from the neighborhood view, this is what the neighborhood will see, the Whole Foods, but with market rate apartments on top. And so it's a urban mixed use design that fits with the existing architecture just to the north. That's already been put in one of the earlier phases of the Oak mixed-use development. But this is what they'll see from the neighborhood side, with the front Whole Foods fronting the neighborhood. On the campus side, you'll see that this is the space that they'll see. And this second level there will hold the student support spaces of a lease that you all have previously approved. And this will provide needed student support spaces that are far away from the campus and not near where the on-campus students are living. So this will be a nice adjacency to where the residential areas are on the Volker campus for UMKC. This is the second level. And the other thing is they're wrapping a parking garage in on this end. This far end down there is a parking garage that's actually kind of hidden pretty well by the architects, and I think it's very attractive. And I know there was a great deal of work done by campus leaders, by the real estate firm, getting all this put together, because this is a significant development. And to remind the curators, this is a 50-year ground lease with options after the 50 years. So what goes there will be there for quite some time. And this is not a university building, so we're candidly bringing this to you just as informational, so as you see this come up, you'll know what to expect. The floors stack very strategically with the parking and the Whole Foods, and then as it moves up, you move into the residential living with the market rate apartments. And in your materials, it walks through exactly all the number of apartments. They have different types, obviously to appeal to different levels of the market, and it moves all the way up to a 6th level. And you can see the parking garage adding parking next to the development so that it doesn't stress the parking areas around this area of the campus. So I think it's a very thoughtful design. Obviously, hundreds of hours of work between the campus and the community and their partner. And we wanted to share this with you so that the curators had an idea of what's about to happen across the street from the administration building at UMKC. Happy to take any questions you might have on this project.
Any questions?
That would be the end of the Finance Committee, Mr. Chairman, and the Audit Committee would be after. So.
Okay. I'm not on the committee. Is there a motion to adjourn?
But yes, Curator Covington asked me to take over. I guess I can recognize myself to motion to adjourn.
Second.
Curator Phillips?
Yes.
Curator Snowden?
Yes.
Curator Steelman?
Yes.
Okay. All votes in favor.
Audit Committee?
Mr. Chairman, we have 3 information items today. Susan Eichhoff from KPMG will present to us the fiscal year 2014 A133 audit report and the NCAA agreed upon procedures, and the fiscal year 2015 external audit scope.
Good afternoon. For those of you who have not met me, I'm Susan Eichhoff. I'm the lead engagement partner on the university's external audit. And this afternoon, as Curator Hendrickson said, I would like to cover with you the results of our OMB Circular A133 audit, our NCAA agreed upon procedures audits, as well as discuss with you some of our planning decisions as we begin the fiscal year 2015 audit of the university. If you recall, the way that we perform the A133 single audit is that we start with having management prepare for us a schedule of expenditure of federal awards. And what this does is list all the expenditures during the fiscal year that the university spends on programs such as research and development, student financial aid, and a host of other federal programs. The face of the schedule of expenditures of federal awards shows approximately $729 million that the university expended during fiscal year 2014. In addition to those, you add the campus-based loan programs that are associated primarily with the Student Financial Assistance Program of another $39 million, bringing total expenditures of federal awards for the university for the fiscal year ended 2014 to $768 million. If you recall from past discussions, we perform procedures in testing the internal control and compliance procedures only relative to what we refer to as major programs. And for fiscal year 14, the university had 6 major programs that you can see listed. The largest program was the Student Financial Assistance Cluster with $531 million. That includes the loan programs. The Research and Development Cluster, the $150 million. The Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program Cluster, the Special Education Cluster, the Cooperative Extension Service Program, and the Foreign Agricultural Services Program. So if you add up all the programs that we perform procedures on, you'll see that we've audited covered procedures over $709 million of the $763 million, so for total coverage of 92%. The remaining programs are what we refer to as non-major programs, and as the auditors were not responsible for performing procedures on those. We give 2 opinions relative to the A133. We reissue what we refer to as our government auditing standards opinion. We went over that with you at the December board meeting. It's issued in connection with the financial statement audit. And then when we issue the A133 audit, we also issue an opinion over compliance and internal control over those major programs that I just discussed. During the single audit, it's possible to have findings. Findings can be instances where there's internal controls that need to be enhanced. The levels of severities of those internal control findings can be either significant deficiencies or material weaknesses. Significant deficiencies are less severe. And there also can be compliance issues with the specific laws and regulations of those programs. Overall, we gave an unmodified opinion on the Student Financial Assistance Program. We had 1 finding that was a significant deficiency and another instance of noncompliance. And so this was a very minor finding, but under the federal regulations, it met the requirement to be reported to you as a finding. And it related to the special tests and provisions over some notifications of how information is posted to the student accounts in the required time frame that the Department of Education requires the university to follow. Regarding the research and development cluster, we issued 3 findings on that program. All 3 of the findings were the least severe, being significant deficiencies. 2 of them had other minor instances of noncompliance. 1 of them was not a noncompliance finding. But overall, we were, again, able to issue an unmodified opinion on research and development, which is telling the public and the federal government that the university complied in all material respects with the requirements applicable to the research and development program. So again, an unmodified opinion is a good opinion. Of the 4 remaining programs of the 6, there were no findings that we noted as we audited those programs as major. And so for those 4, we also gave an unmodified opinion. Are there any questions on the A133 report and findings before I move forward to NCAA? All right, moving on. If you recall, we perform procedures over the Division I institutions annually and over the Division II institutions every 3 years. And so 2014 represented just the Columbia and the Kansas City campus. In an agreed upon procedures report for NCAA, the NCAA provides guidelines to the auditors. We work with management to select minimum sample sizes to accomplish the requirements of the NCAA, and we issued 2 reports, one for Kansas City and one Columbia, on January 14th of 2015. Both reports contained very minimal exceptions in them and were overall clean, and the procedures were performed, and both campuses that we performed the procedures on were in good compliance with those. Any questions on NCAA before I move to the 2015 planning considerations? Okay. From a team perspective, as the overall basic financial statements of the university is concerned, from a team perspective, we have exact continuity of our team returning for fiscal year 15, with myself leading the entire engagement and the managers and the in-charge also returning consistent with the prior years. As we start to begin planning procedures, we would like to remind everyone of management's responsibilities versus the audit committee's responsibilities. Basically, as we've discussed in the past, management is responsible for things like adopting sound accounting principles, for fairly presenting the financial statements in a conformity with generally accepted accounting principles, for establishing and maintaining internal control and complying with the laws and the regulations. As the audit committee of the Board of Curators, you're responsible for the oversight of that financial reporting process. You're also responsible for ensuring that management maintains internal control to prevent, detect, and deter fraud, and also for setting the proper tone and creating and maintaining a culture of honesty and ethical behavior. From a scope perspective, the scope for fiscal year 15 is very similar to past years, with the exception of it being a requirement for the other divisions of NCAA to be audited, and so we'll be doing all 4 campuses. But besides that, the scope of our procedures, which includes a separate opinion on MU Healthcare and the Capital Region Medical Center, in addition to the overall university financial statements, the A133 and the 4 NCAAs, is the same as in prior year. Laid out for you the audit timeline just at a very high level. We spend pretty much from this day forward through June in doing planning procedures and beginning our substantive procedures, where we test detailed transactions relative to both the financial statements and A133. In the July through December timeframe, we're performing all the rest of our substantive procedures, conducting interviews with management, documenting and testing internal control and substantive procedures, and issuing our reports. In the January through March timeframe, then, we're finalizing the NCAA procedures, finalizing the A133 procedures, and issuing those 2 reports just at a very high level. We do involve others within the audit. We do use certain specialists as it relates primarily to information technology and actuaries for both self-insurance and pension and other post-employment benefit obligations, as well as tax review specialist and valuation specialist. In addition, the university has external experts that assist with the valuation of investments, self-insurance, pension and other post-employment benefit obligations, various derivative investments, instruments that the university holds, and in-kind contributions. In addition to that, there are various service organizations that are used by the university. As we begin procedures for fiscal year 15, one of the things that we do is we assess the preliminary financial statement level risks. Some of those risks we've laid out for you, and we'll be working with members of management in the next coming weeks to update our consideration of the preliminary risks. But those mainly evolve around the valuation of alternative investments, regulatory compliance under A133, as we just discussed, accounting for gifts and contributions, risk management, general information technology controls, and various activities surrounding MU healthcare relative to medical service revenues, receivables, and contractual allowances. There's one new accounting pronouncement that is applicable in the future, and that is Governmental Accounting Standards Board number 72. As in the past, we'll be working with management to discuss with them the implications of this accounting standard on the financial statements. But I can tell you, for those of you that were on the board for the implementation of the pension standards, GASB 67 and 68, it won't be nearly this painful. So we have a very light year, couple light years coming up. We do make available our Audit Committee Institute as a resource for the Board of Curators, and specifically the Audit Committee. We remind you of that and list the resources here on the slide. The remaining information that you will find within your packet are required communications since the time I last spoke with you in December, where we provide you a copy of our engagement letters and the representation letters that represent the major communications between KPMG and management of the university. And so you'll see the NCAA engagement letter, as well as the 2 representation letters for NCAA and the A133 representation letter attached to your packet. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you have regarding the external audit.
I have one question. How would you rate the derivative instruments risk?
The derivative instrument hasn't changed in past years, and so it's a pretty stable derivative instrument, and we're very familiar with it. We see it at other institutions. And so while it's something that we watch and definitely consider and make sure it's accounted properly, it doesn't present, I'll say, new risk per se, in particular in fiscal year 2015. More of an ongoing risk. Okay.
Other questions?
Okay, thank you.
For our final information item, we have John Tverdick with PwC, who will present the quarterly audit report and follow-up reports.
Thank you. Good afternoon. So it's a brief discussion today. I just want to give you an update on what we've covered since we last met with you, which is today we're going to cover 3 audit reports. We've got 3 other draft reports in process and 7 audits that are in process. And today I'm also going to cover, twice a year we do the update on management responses for past provided reports. So here are the 3 reports that we're going to cover today, and we'll jump right into it. So the first one is the Block School of Management at UMKC. So this organization has 6 academic departments and about 1,800 students. There are 5 points that we want to cover with you today. The first one deals with the school's financial state. As you can see, there's a comment in here that there's an accumulated deficit of $10.6 million at the end of fiscal year 14 that was built up over the last 5+ years. So our first comment for management is to develop an action plan to get the revenues and the expenses more in alignment. The second comment is around strengthening expenditure controls. This was really around review and monitoring. And I'd just like to make a comment that the campus leadership has already taken action to remediate that point, significant action. The third comment is around enhancing communication and stakeholder alignment. And what this deals with the 6 departments in the school, through our interviews, there was a greater need for transparency and understanding around financial decisions and investments. I believe that the new dean has taken this to heart and has really started to enhance the level of communication throughout the school. The last 2 comments deal with expenditures.
These are really around proper documentation and review and approval. So that's my comment about the Block School of Management. Any questions there? We'll move to the second audit, which is a capital projects review. So there's a group at the system that oversees the major construction projects, and then down at the campus level, the construction management and project management takes place. So we looked at the overall business process involved, plus we looked at 3 projects. One at MU, the football stadium, and 2 at St. Louis, Science Center, the science and the recreation facility. So we had 2 comments here. The first one is there are roles and responsibilities that are divided at the system level and at the campus level, and we've asked the system level folks to spend some additional time clarifying that matrix so that there's not an overlap and there's not a gap between what happens at a campus level and what happens at a system level. And the second comment really is around what happens related to project management down at a campus level within the project. So the board approval, the design happens up at the system level. The management of the project happens down at the campus level. The process that is followed is not consistent from campus to campus. We had our construction experts in here. They laid out a number of recommendations for the consideration of the system folks to provide as guidance for each of the campus levels. The third one I have is around merit-based compensation. As you know, there's a new performance management system across the system. There are 6 comments here, and they were really all tied together. And the theme is to take the performance management system for employees and tie it to merit-based compensation. And so the theme of the 6 goes to adopting that philosophy across the system, mandating that performance appraisals are mandated for employees, and then going through the process to make sure that the performance appraisal is has objectivity and fairness policies in place so that people can rely on that when it's tied to their compensation, so that on each campus where performance appraisals are taking place, they're taking place at the same time where merit compensation is doled out, and there are proper tools, technology, and training that goes in. And then finally, with any good program, that there are metrics that are put in place to measure the success that you're trying to achieve in this area. So those are the 3 audits that I want to cover. As I do twice a year, we go through the management responses that are out there. What happens is the Internal Audit Steering Committee goes through and looks at all responses that are due. They make an assessment as to which ones are closed, which ones are past due. We come through and we do an audit of at least 50% of the open items that are that came due. We audited about 61% this year. This time, there were 30 items that came due. The good news is all but 1 were sufficiently completed by the management team, and the one that's out there really was a matter of timing. It's going to be done this summer. When you look, and that, by the way, was in the Department of Residential Life at MU, you'll notice there's some open items at MUHS. I've covered those with you and the board. They just didn't have a due date in the 6 months. The due date is this summer, and it relates to some physician contracting matters that we're dealing with. So that concludes my report. I just want to say thank you, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions? Thank you very much, Jake.
Thank you.
I would entertain a motion from the audit committee to go into executive session.
So moved. Second.
Curator Graham?
Yes.
Curator Hendrickson?
Yes.
Curator Phillips?
Yes.
Curator Steelman?
Yes.
Okay, all votes in favor.
At this time,